So today we will be making a video about infrared LEDs, which I have over 60 of. They primarily came from a bunch of remotes that my dad gave me, and I desoldered all the LEDs from them. Now I have quite an extensive collection. They emit light in the infrared part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which means that you cannot see the light that is emitted from these things. They emit in the infrared wavelengths, not visible wavelengths. Those are the guinea pigs right there, and they'll be making noise throughout this video. So, I will be testing some of these today and doing some quite interesting experiments. Now, the one thing about LEDs is that they only work in one direction, right? They only have one polarity in which they work. So let's say that you connect one lead of an LED onto the positive end of a battery, and connect the other lead onto the negative end. And let's say it lights up. Right? If you switch the polarity of it, if you connect that same lead to the negative end and the other lead to the positive end, it will not light up. It only works in one direction. So, I've already got this test LED set up here in correct polarity, and let's see if it works. The infrared light will create a kind of purplish violet-white glow, and this is purely infrared output. There is no optical output. You cannot see anything coming out from this LED. The camera will detect it because the camera's sensors are sensitive to infrared light. Now, they do put infrared blocking filters in here which block out a fair amount of the infrared light, but they're kind of cheap, and more intense sources of infrared light can stimulate a response. See? That's all infrared light coming out of there. There is no visual response. There is no visual light being emitted. I cannot see anything. If you're just going at this from like a visual test, it would look like the LED is dead, but it's not, because we can get infrared emission from this. Here are some infrared blocking filters that I also salvaged from the remotes. These things, did I say infrared blocking or infrared passing? I'm not sure. Anyhow, these things pass infrared light but block most visual light. If I put this in front of the camera, you will not see anything, aside from some more intense sources of visual light, right? But if I connect this lead up to here, get in there. The ends of this wire are a bit frayed, which makes it somewhat difficult to put in these contacts. Oh, come on. Oh, just get in there. Thank you. So we have the LED light up, put this over it, and you can see the infrared light that is not being blocked by the filter. The filter appears dark because it filters out all visual light, but it leaves the infrared light behind, which the camera can detect. I find this somewhat fascinating. So I constructed another infrared light source, which I have a 201 electronic set here. Got it when I was 9, and it has these little spring thingamajiggers on. That's how you connect it to the components. And I kind of drew on this idea. I took some springs and I connected some LEDs up to it to make kind of something of a mega power source. So I can connect this other thing here. I'm not getting a very good connection. Pretty intense source, as you can see. I'm thinking of making more of these things, just to like kind of use as an infrared flashlight, because I can actually read with these things in the dark. This thing's somewhat makeshift, which is why I get somewhat of a crappy connection with it. So I have another thing, which is somewhat interesting as well. It's a TV remote. Now, the TV remote communicates with the TV using an infrared LED. And there is no visual output, but if I aim it up to the camera, you can see a pulsing infrared light in there, whereas I cannot see anything when I just look at it through visual light. And, let's see. Yeah. Here's another little infrared light experiment I made. It uses a 9-volt and kind of draws on the same spring thing that I was using to make the other infrared LED thing. So we can connect this up here. See the infrared light coming out. Now you don't want to leave this on for very long because these resistors I soldered on here can somewhat heat up. And you also never want to connect an LED of any sort, particularly these infrared LEDs, directly up to a 9-volt battery, because they'll blow out pretty quickly, like in about a second or so. And you'll know that they've blown out because they'll typically emit like a pulse of orange light. You'll hear a sizzling sound, and there's going to be a burnt electronic smell. That's how you know that you've burnt one of these out. So, I got several of these filters, got several infrared LEDs. I think this is a rather nifty little setup I have here. Now it's also actually possible to do microscope experiments with this. Here's my microscope. Here's my infrared LEDs. Now I have to take a minute to get this set up here. Pull that out. It's a bit difficult to get a useful connection on this thing. Okay, somewhat of a crappy connection because I just had to wrap the wires around this thing. And it's not lighting up. Why are you not lighting up? Because the wire connections are crappy. Piggies, I don't need it right now. I think they're lit up. Well, they were, and they kind of are. Okay, and they're still lit up. Good. It's always a good sign when your things actually work. I am going to use these infrared LEDs as actually something of an illuminator for this microscope. And I'm going to, under this microscope, I'm going to view the rough plastic areas of this slide. This little microscope slide I have. Now it'll take a little bit of time to get this completely set up, because it's rather difficult. Good. What do you get on there? That's infrared light that you're seeing with the microscope. I'm not sure what those patterns are. It's not the pattern of anything that's being placed in the microscope. So now I just put the slide in there. I'm going to be imaging some of the more uneven regions of it. There. That's what uneven plastic looks like under a microscope. So I'm actually getting images in infrared light from a microscope. I think this is pretty nifty. And if I just look in there with my eye, I cannot see anything, because this is an infrared light. So yes, you have it here. Infrared microscopy. Yay! And I just pulled the illuminator out. Anyhow, I've also done something equally as fascinating, which is reverse engineering a flashlight to emit an infrared wavelengths. I took the normal light bulb out of the flashlight, and in it I replaced it with an infrared LED. See if it turns on. Yay! And there's no optical output. There is, I cannot see anything coming from this flashlight, but there's still light there. And the connection is, again, somewhat crappy, because here is the setup I used. On the end of one battery I used some magnets to stick an LED to it. And then as an interface with the switch, I then put a little piece of aluminum foil on this other contact here. So it's somewhat of a makeshift setup, but it actually does work pretty well. Do I have anything else here? Ah, yeah. It's on how infrared light can shine through paper. Now, if you try this experiment with the green LED, you won't see any green light showing through. If you try it with a red LED, you will see some red light showing through. If you try it with infrared, you'll also see some light shining through right there. Now the intensity of the light shining through is actually probably fairly intense, given that this camera only detects intense sources of infrared light. And again, if you try it with a green LED, you'll not see any light shining through. If you try it with a red LED, you'll see some light shining through. And then if you try it with these infrared LEDs, then you'll see even more light shining through. So I will leave my viewers to speculate on why this is. Why only the longer wavelengths of light can shine through the paper, whereas normal wavelengths cannot. I'd also like to talk about another experiment I once did, which was on these little things called photoresistors, I think they are. Now, a resistor is basically something that resists the flow of electric current. It reduces it, which I think can pretty easily be told from the name. So the resistance of something is basically a measure of how much it resists the voltage from a battery. Like, fairly obvious what it is. And so there are these things called photoresistors right here. It uses a compound called cadmium sulfide. And it is sensitive to light. If you shine a bright light on it, the resistance will reduce. But I decided to try this with an infrared LED, and it actually went fairly successfully. The photoresistor was actually sensitive to infrared light. The resistance decreased fairly dramatically when an infrared LED was shown on it, which I think is pretty nifty, because it's actually sensitive to infrared and not just visible light. And another use of infrared LEDs is reading in the dark, because I actually made a video somewhere of where I shone an infrared LED near a book, and I could actually use my camera to discern some of the text from it. So hypothetically, you could read in the dark without anyone seeing the light if you had a digital camera to pick up the infrared reflection off the book. No one else would see it because you cannot see infrared light with your naked eyes, but a camera can. So I think this is the end of the video.